I scored 293 in anthropology this year. So this is my first mains with anthropology.
అండ్ సార్ కూడా నాకు చెప్పారు కొన్ని రోజుల క్రితం నేను మీకు ఖచ్చితంగా డాక్టర్ ఫీల్ ఎక్స్పెక్ట్ చేస్తున్నాను. నేను అసలు నమ్మలేదు. ఓకే అంటున్నారేమో సార్ మోటివేట్ చేయడానికి అన్నారు. లైక్ ఐ రిమెంబర్ ఆల్వేస్ చెప్పారు నీకు వస్తూ చూడు ఐ హ్యావ్ స్ట్రాంగ్ ఫీలింగ్ దిస్ టైమ్ డాక్టర్.
ఒకప్పుడు నేను ఆస్పిరెంట్లా ఉన్నప్పుడు ఒక ఆల్ ఇండియా ర్యాంక్ ఏదో ఒక ర్యాంక్ వస్తే బాగుండు అన్న సైడ్ నుంచి ఉండేవాడిని. తర్వాత మళ్ళీ ఆస్పిరెంట్స్ స్టూడెంట్స్కి క్లాసెస్ చెప్పినప్పుడు కూడా మన వాళ్ళకి ఎవరికైనా వస్తే బాగుండు అనే ఫీలింగ్. అలాంటిది నాట్ ఓన్లీ ర్యాంక్ టాప్ 10లో ర్యాంక్ 3 అంటే ఇట్స్ రియలీ ఏ ఫ్యాబులస్ ర్యాంక్. It's all because of her hard work, her consistency and her smart work as well. So ivanni only for you people. So she will be decoding, she will be demystifying, she will be simplifying it. Hello all. So today here we are felicitate as well as to cherish the All India Rank 3 Uma Harathi. Why? Because struggling for 4 attempts, first attempt, second attempt, third attempt, fourth attempt, the fifth attempt, it's a great thing. Coming out from failure, everyone, including me also, we can learn a lot. Because coming out from failure is something very big thing. And lastly, in the 5th attempt, a very good rank. It's more than that. I personally appreciate her only because of staying still 5th attempt with lot of confidence. Why? Because giving up is one of the trait which is very common with our Indians. It's not working. So next, good thing. Why? Because we have to have plan B. Obviously, we should have a plan B. But she had a lot of opportunities. She went for Japan, etc., etc. In spite of that, for her consistency, we should appreciate. And once again, for Uma Harathi. Thanks for coming here. So you will be interacting with them, not with me.
So as sir said, this is my 5th attempt, and so this is my first mains with anthropology. Earlier I had a different optional, and then I changed my optional to anthropology in this attempt, and it worked for me. So I am glad that most of you must be having anthropology as optional here. It's a good choice. It's a great subject, or more particularly a short subject, and there's a lot of scope to score if you prepare properly. So we'll keep this discussion limited to anthropology. We'll see what small things you can do to extract more marks from anthropology. So I scored 293 in anthropology this year. After a bit, we'll have a more of an interactive session where you can ask me very specific doubts on how to increase marks or whatever doubts that you may be having. But to begin with, let me summarize what all I did for anthropology, because this is the first time I was writing with anthropology, and I wanted to make sure that I was not repeating any of the mistakes I had done earlier with my geography optional. So the first thing I did was strictly stick to syllabus and previous year's question. So I prepared notes on all the syllabus topics, and these notes are very crisp, never more than 1 or 2 A4 size sheets per topic. And I generally prepared them by referring to the standard textbooks and any other sources that were available, but mostly standard textbooks. My objective was to understand a topic properly and have a 1-page notes on that, so that if any question comes out of that, I should be able to answer. So in order to understand the topic properly, I refer to standard textbooks, I refer to YouTube videos and any other material available. But I made sure after going through all of that, I understood the topic. See, if you do not understand the concepts and topics in an optional subject, you won't be able to answer the questions. Even anthropology, if you look at the last 2 years, the questions have become slightly more analytical compared to earlier when the questions were more direct. So understanding the topic is very important. And second is how to decide how much to study, as in how should the width and depth of the coverage of a topic should be. For this, I always had previous year's questions on the site, so topic wise previous year's questions, and I prepared my notes and I studied only as per those previous year's questions. So let's say there's a topic on classical evolutionism or cognitive theories. So I first looked at how much deep are they asking questions. So and how analytical are the questions. I tried to grasp that, and then I opened my textbook and then I read the topic, and I read it to the point where I was ready to summarize it in few points. And let's say, so I had different methods of making notes for different topics. So for example, if it's a theories topic, I would have an introduction, I would have a conclusion, I would always summarize the theory into 4 or 5 basic postulates. Anything beyond 4 or 5 basic postulate means you have not really understood the theory, and you cannot even replicate it in the actual exam. So why bother to have more than 4 or 5 postulates? Any theory never have more than 4 or 5 postulates. After postulates, then I wrote down 1 or 2 works of the scholars, very specific works with scholar names that I can quote. And for every theory, I included contemporary relevance, whether they asked or I have not asked. I always included contemporary relevance. For example, I was going through a topper copy of Mr. Maurya Bharadwaj from, I think, 2020 or 19, I don't remember. So when I was going through his answer copies, there was a question on symbolic anthropology. So in the conclusion, he mentioned, if we see, we have practices such as Jallikattu today, which have become controversial. So symbolic anthropology helps us analyze these issues, because these are symbols in the society, especially for instance the Jallikattu. So that is why we need to look at these practices from a symbolic anthropology point of view, so that we can understand them better and regulate them better. So this is such a nice point to quote, because he is connecting very static theory to what is happening today and what we are seeing in the newspapers today. Now that is called as contemporary relevance. You can relate to contemporary events only when you have understood the concept well. So in most of my answers, theories or otherwise, I try to bring in some contemporary aspect. This is one thing. And secondly, being smart about using paper 1 examples in paper 2, paper 2 examples in paper 1. This also reduces the burden of collecting examples, and you can just keep switching. And another thing that helped me was having pre-made introductions and conclusions for all the syllabus topic. So I had a document where it had 3 columns. The first column was syllabus topic name, for example, classic evolutionism or Paleolithic period, whatever, the left column. The second column was introduction, the third column was conclusion. So for every syllabus topic of paper 1 and paper 2, I had these ready. And whenever you're studying, let's say you're revising some topic, it's easy to think about a good conclusion and a good introduction. You don't have to like look around or anything. Just think, in the conclusion, maybe how can I relate it to contemporary events? Or in introduction, can I quote somebody and introduce this topic? So the point is, it's easy to do this conclusion introduction part when you're preparing rather than in the exam on spot. So when you have introductions and conclusions ready, the time you take for an answer reduces, and you already have like very good punch conclusions. So even if your body is not so good, maybe looking at the conclusion, the person might feel that, whoever is checking, that you understood the topic and you can relate it to the contemporary world. So this is something that really helped me. I made all these conclusions and introductions beforehand, and I kept mugging them up. So whenever I would write a mock test or so, I try to ensure that I'm incorporating these. And next, I also made several diagrams. See, these diagrams do not have to be like very complicated diagrams, very simple diagrams, flow charts, etc. You can make them only if you're conscious about making them. So let's say you're studying a topic. you think about, okay, how can I put this topic in diagrammatic form? So that conscious thought has to be there. So that can be done, and I refer to topper copies extensively. So whenever I found something diagrammatic in any topper copy, I immediately took it, and I was hell bent on using it. If a question were to come on that topic, then I must use the diagram. So that's how the approach should be. So if you look at all this, one thing becomes clear, that you have to write to get marks. You have to be very ruthless about how can I get that extra mark. It doesn't matter like how deep your knowledge is or how wide your knowledge is. What matters is, are you or are you not able to get that extra mark out of each question. So approach every mains with that focus. GS or optional, how to get that extra mark, and it is these small things that help you increase your marks. So this was my overall strategy. And secondly, I also practiced a lot of tests for anthropology as well as general studies. I wrote sectional tests, full length tests over a period of time until a point where I was comfortable writing answers. So in the actual exam, I was on an autopilot mode because I had practiced to that extent that I had no difficulty writing answers. It really didn't matter how difficult the questions or what questions they were asking. I was able to write a decent answer irrespective of how difficult the question was. So this came after a lot of practice. Initially, because anthropology was new to me, I was very reluctant to write answers or write full length tests. But somehow my friends pushed me to go and appear for the full sectional tests or full length tests, and slowly my scores began to improve. And I learned how to write better by looking at others' copies, by looking at toppers' copies. So in and all, like, prepare in keeping in mind how to get marks. It's not about the content, it's not about your depth of knowledge, it's about how well you can write or present what little you know. And secondly, how well you can practice. So practice as much as possible and take the suggestions given by the evaluators seriously and work on every suggestion. For instance, so in general studies papers, I used to have this problem. In all the tests, mock tests that I appeared, I tended to leave a question because time was not sufficient for me. So I wanted to fill that gap. There was a constant suggestion that I was getting, do not leave any answers, do not leave any answers. So just to fill that gap, I had written 5 or 6 more tests to push myself to finish the paper. So I'm just giving an example. If there's any suggestion that you think makes sense and you think that you should do it, then please practice more to implement that suggestion. So it is through practice that you learn how to write well and how to improve your answers. And always have topper copies ready. Copy everything from them. Like if you like their diagrams, take them. If you like their conclusions, take them. If you like their examples, take them. That's a very smart way of preparing. So more or less, this is what I did for anthropology. So if you have any specific doubts, then I think that would be more useful than me going on and on about what I did. So you can ask.
కరెంట్ అఫైర్స్ కి మీరు మంత్లీ కంపైలేషన్స్ అట్లా వద్దు అని చెప్పారు. అంటే ఓన్లీ న్యూస్ పేపర్స్ ఆఫీస్ రిలేట్ చేసుకుని చదవండి అని చెప్పారు. అంటే ఏదైనా మిస్ అవుతూ ఉంటుందా ఫైనల్గా ఎగ్జామ్?
So you have to learn to pick important topics. And how do you know which topics are important? See, 2 ways. One is look at the previous year's questions. Look at the kind of current affairs that UPSC tends to focus on. And secondly, see if an issue is getting repeated again and again and again. Like G20 was always in the news. Ukraine conflict was always in the news. So make sure you're not missing them. So yes, it may happen that you're missing 1 or 2 topics, but look at the bigger picture. You have cut down monthlies from your preparation, which is huge amount of trash. So instead, you have just a specified number of current affairs topics which you have prepared your notes on and which you can revise again and again. And you will use them, trust me, if you revise properly, across the papers in the form of examples or in the form of case studies, in the form of introductions, in the form of conclusions. This will happen only if you keep your current affairs list short, and these should be high probable topics. and revise them multiple times so that you can use more efficiently, like you'll extract maximum out of those few topics. Ethics. So, so like for any other subject, even for ethics, I stuck to making syllabus, making notes syllabus wise. So for every syllabus point, I had very short notes. In these notes, I had introduction, I had conclusion. I made sure, see, I was hell-bent on putting a box in my ethics answer. So I did not know what that box would be, but I wanted to put a box right below the introduction. So that's why I prepared some diagrams. I copied some diagrams from topic copies. So for every syllabus topic of ethics, I had some diagram or the other. So something as simple as, see, if there's a question on governance, I used to write, this is governance. Right, this is good governance. This is ethical governance. So this is where we should progress. This is a very simple diagram, no? The idea is you have to be very, sure about using some diagram. So I would write an introduction and then I would immediately put a box here, like immediately, and then I'll come up with something to write in the box. And all these diagrams I didn't make up in the exam hall. See, in the exam hall, your brain is almost switched off. You're in some sort of a race that you have to finish the paper. So all these diagrams should be prepared beforehand. So you have, likewise, you can have diagrams for attitude, aptitude, code of conduct, work culture, everything. If you just put little effort into it, you can make beautiful and simple diagrams for all the ethics topics. So this I had introduction, I had a diagram, I had a conclusion, I had lots of examples for all the topics. And what it did with the examples was, I tried to keep them diverse, like some from history, some from mythology like Ravana, Duryodhana, and some from contemporary examples like Elon Musk or Infosys founder and others. And also I had like 20 names of civil servants who had done good stuff and what they did. Very, very crisply, like your example cannot be more than 1 or 2 sentences. You won't have time to write anything more than that. So be very like crisp, like Armstrong Palme for People's Road. So small examples like that. So I had 20 examples of civil servants. I think 5 or 6 of mythological personalities, 10 of historical personalities, and 6 or 7 on contemporary people like Waterman, Sundarlal Bahuguna, and etc. So I had those limited examples, but very powerful examples and diverse in nature, and I used them wherever I wanted. Instead of having, see, sometimes yes, you can have very specific examples, but it's also important to have a chunk of examples ready in your hand so that you can mold them and use them wherever you want. So the People's Road example, you can use it for ethical governance, you can use it for perseverance, you can use it for people's participation, you can use it for ethical governance, and lots of such things. So have limited examples, but know like how can I extract the maximum out of every examples by putting it in multiple places. So that should be the approach. Because I've seen many people, and even I in the earlier attempts used to accumulate lot of examples. That's a very inefficient way to do things. Have limited examples and like think about ways to maximize output from those examples. And practice. Ethics is all about practice, especially this year's paper. It was very, very lengthy. So make sure you're practicing a lot, so that you get a hang of how to write theory, you get a hang of how to write case studies, and use topper copies when practicing.
My question is regarding essays. If you observe this from last 3 to 4 years, they are more tend towards philosophy. So what's your approach to this? How do you do it?
It is true that essays are becoming more philosophical, but no matter how the essay is, you have to write an essay like an administrator is writing an essay. So just because that is philosophical, the question, don't make your entire essay philosophical. So try to open up the topic. By opening up, I mean think about the topic from different dimensions: social dimensions, individual dimensions, economic dimensions, political dimensions, geopolitical, cultural dimensions. So this is the brainstorming work that you do in the first 15 minutes. Think about all the dimensions. This is one thing. So if you cannot open up a essay topic, you won't be able to score marks. Second thing, whenever you make a point in an essay, you're trying to put forth a point, immediately substantiate it with a good example. And the examples in essay, they should be slightly more elaborate than the examples that we write in general studies papers. Like think about examples, and these examples, again, you do not need so many examples. Just have like 7 or 8 good examples of personalities, different personalities. In fact, the examples that you prepare for ethics can be used there as well, but you just have to elaborate them slightly. And whenever you're making a point, substantiate with example. And the third thing is, please maintain flow between the paragraphs or dimensions. See, it's easy to link individual dimension with social dimensions by saying every person is a sum of 5 people around, or by saying things like man is a social animal, therefore any individual level things will have consequences on the society. Or link economic and political by saying anything economic will eventually fall into politics. So those connecting lines. So when I was practicing essays, this was a constant suggestion that I got from the evaluators, that my dimensions were not linked or they were not flowing organically. So what I did was I downloaded the top copies of whoever scored highest in essay, and I tried to see how they were linking the dimensions. So from their papers, I picked up these connecting words, like 10 connecting sentences, and I used them in my essay as well. So second was that. And third is, have pre-made introductions and conclusions. So keep them generic so that you can link them to different topics. For example, I had a story or introduction on Buddha. The story was, there lived a prince in the foothills of Himalayas. He was born to a very wealthy king, and he had all the riches that he wanted. And yet he decided that he was not happy or not satisfied with all the material wealth and political power. Something was lacking in him, so because of which he decided to leave all that behind and find himself or discover himself. So this was the story that I had beforehand. Now there was a question in essay. The question was, a ship is not meant to be in harbor, it's meant to sail out in the sea. So this was a story that I had, and this is the question that I got. So I wanted to mold that story to this question. So I started by saying, there lived a prince in the foothills of Himalayas. He had everything that he wanted. He was son of a very wealthy king, material wealth, political power, blah blah. But still he realized that that is not what life is about, just sitting and enjoying all the comforts that you already have. So he felt that he needed to go out or sail out into the actual world and discover himself. So, and then I said, so that's how he left everything behind and he started his journey out into so he left his harbor and he went out into the sea. So let us find out if he really found himself. So I wrote my essay by, looking at different dimensions, and in the conclusion, I brought that back by saying that in the story that we started with, it was none other than Lord Buddha himself. It was only when he set out of his harbor, a safe harbor, and he took risks and he discovered himself through various processes that he found enlightenment. And this process not only helped him to find enlightenment, but also give the world the message of his message. So that's how I closed. So my idea is, have some good stories in your hand, and these stories should be versatile so that you can use them in different areas. And where can you find these stories? Just go and pick them up from topper copies. So most of the stories that I prepared, I had like 6 or 7 stories, very basic stories that we may have already heard. Like, remember, there's a Jain story on elephant and people like tie their eyes and then. So that I had. So these are like small stories that I picked up from topper copies and I had them ready. And when I was practicing my mock test, I was practicing how to link that particular story to the essay given. It's always possible if you're like little conscious about it and creative about it. So this reduces your burden to a large extent if you prepare everything in advance. So on the day of the exam, it's only execution. There is no, you can't sit and think about introduction there. You can, but it's inefficient. So if you already have some introduction beforehand, there you will sit and think about, okay, how can I remold this? Or which of the 7 stories will fit this properly? And for both the essays, I could use the stories that I prepared beforehand. And these stories I picked up from topper copies that I was coming across. So this was my broad strategy for essay.
Excuse me. You practice GS mix answer writing from a beginner to AIR-3.
Yeah. Right. So this is my 5th attempt. So I wrote a lot of answers. And but the problem is I was always doing the same mistakes. So it was only in this attempt that I made several changes to the answer writing. So if I have to like summarize some of the things for answer writing, so first of all, make sure your presentation is very neat. So I was going through the top 20 copies last year, and I found something common. They were very neat. Their handwriting was not beautiful or something. They were neat in their presentation. The things were symmetric, like whatever they're writing. All these small things matter, because whoever is checking should feel like giving you answers, giving you marks. So neatness of presentation is important. And even for GS topics, I had introductions and conclusions ready for all the syllabus topics. And I wrote all my points in bullet format. And each point is always substantiated with a fact or an example. Like I never left any points unsubstantiated. And my sentences were very crisp. So never write a point which exceeds more than 2 sentences. You're doing nobody a favor by doing that, because the other person won't read it. See, whatever you're writing, whatever you're trying to communicate should hit the other person in the first sentence itself. And the second sentence, you can just maybe substantiate with an example. And use lots of diagrams, flow charts. Just be innovative. This is what you should be doing between prelims and mains, not accumulating content or doing the basic things again and again. It's these value addition things which will fetch you marks. So every extra mark, if you can get, I was hell-bent on doing this, that I should get 1 mark extra in every answer that I'm going to write this year. So I made all this, whatever I'm talking about, I put all this in each of my answers. So that, and I did not leave any space in the, if they gave me 3 papers, I finished the 3 papers. So some things that you can do to, like, it may sound silly to finish all the papers, but maybe just, see, at that point, it was my 5th attempt. I was desperate to make sure I will not leave any stone unturned. So I made sure, okay, if UPSC is giving me space to write, I will not leave any of it. So if this is a paper, this is the margin. Sometimes I used to like put a box and then put a diagram. This is one way to use the space more properly. And in some other forms, if this is the paper, I would like write in this format. So this way, this space, like, you will still use all the 2 pages that they've given, and it will also look better. It cuts the monotony of just writing things, because everybody writes like this. And whenever I'm drawing a diagram, I always put it in a box. I labeled it small, like, figure, what is that about? So you have to consciously do each of these things in every single answer, and it can be done provided you practice a lot for it. It won't come overnight, or it won't come in maybe 1, 2 or 3 tests that you practice initially, but stick with it. Don't get demotivated by whatever feedback you may be getting or whatever marks you may be getting. Just focus on, okay, these are the things that I want to execute or practice through my mock test. So let me see if I'm able to do it or not. With that approach, just keep practicing. So look at topper copies. Never stop looking at topper copies. It's a very smart way to prepare. Pick up everything from their copies. And like these presentations also, like one of my friends who already cleared, like he always wrote his answers in this format. and it helped him fill pages or not leave any pages. So I picked it up from him and then I started writing it. So, and always have like nice conclusions. If you put little thought into conclusions, right when you're revising whatever syllabus topics you're revising, just give some thought to the conclusion and write that conclusion on the side. And if any question comes on that topic, question can be anything, your introduction and conclusions can still be the same. You will address the demand in the body of the answer. So like write nice conclusions. This I think is a major factor which helped me score better this time.
There are certain questions which come out of preparation, you cannot prepare for that. For example, she's paper of fuel and gas system, and there was another open side question.
There was right.
So, what is your strategy?
So I left those two questions that you talked about. You always have a choice to pick questions, right? And that is why it's important to do the syllabus, the basics thoroughly. And I think there was also a question on Mesolithic or Paleolithic, I don't remember, but it was slightly twisted. It's not very direct. So what I did was I wrote what I know. And then I, even with a lot of confidence, see, in that particular question that I picked, I knew two questions very well. This third question, I think something about Mesolithic period or anything, some analytical question, but I only prepared static part on Mesolithic or whatever Paleolithic. So what I did was I wrote with full confidence whatever I knew. I put my diagrams, I put my whatever, I filled 2 pages. In the third page, I came to the demand of the question. I tried to link in whatever way that I knew, or I try to quote some scholars, because the actual demand I only knew 1 or 2 points. I did not know anything beyond 1 or 2 points, but I can't leave the question. No, it's a competitive exam. I'm sure nobody else knows, or maybe 1-2 people know, but I can't leave the question. So I decided I'll write what I know, and then I will use those 1-2 points a little creatively and still fill the pages. So don't chase those questions, which are very like bouncer questions and stuff. Try to handle them like with a little bit of creativity in the exam itself, but do your basics thoroughly.
In the time gap between prelims and mains, how much time do you devote for optional and GS, like balancing both?
I would say give at least 50% of your time to optional and ethics. These two are extremely scoring. So, but the thing is, GS is so wide, right? So we keep reading, and then, but on the other hand, ethics and optional are very specific. So you can draw a boundary to these topics, but you cannot draw a boundary to GS3 or GS2, or at least it's difficult to draw a boundary. So don't invest too much time there. With whatever current affairs you may be doing, or with whatever prelims preparations you may be doing, you will be able to answer GS 1, 2, 3 to a certain extent. So, and essay. So essay, GS 1, 2, 3, these papers 50% of your time, but the rest 50% should be dedicated to optional and ethics, which will fetch you like really good marks and they'll spike your score. So this can be the practice.
Why did you take GS mains test series?
So see, the thing about test series is it really doesn't matter where you take it. You can just pick up, you can close your eyes and pick up any test series, okay, provided they're willing to give you checked copies in time and you know what you're trying. See, all these things that I talked about, I evolved them with the help of my friends by looking at topper copies, etc. So we made a list of 10 to 20 things that we need to do in our answers. Now, why do we need test series? To see if we are able to do those things. So you already know what you want to do in the test series. So it really doesn't matter what test series you take. Whichever you take them in time, write answers, see if you're able to implement what you want to implement, and also work on their suggestions because you could have missed on something, and keep revising them. So it really doesn't matter which one you take. So again, GS3 also same thing. Syllabus wise, I had my notes prepared well in hand. And secondly, since I practiced a lot, even questions such as James Webb Telescope or cellulose, I can write to some extent, like write a decent answer. And like I said, James Webb Telescope was one of the topics that I picked as part of my current affairs. Why? Because it was on the front page of the newspaper, and there was a lot of hype around when they introduced, or like when it sent some images or something. In fact, US President said something about that event. He said how great an achievement it is, and how, you know, how it gives us humility to go back into time and look at the beginning of everything. So he said a quote. So I understood, okay, this is an important development for science and technology. It's very likely to come up in the exam. So in fact, on that day, Hindu had given a table distinguishing Hubble telescope and James Webb telescope. I picked that up. I picked up the US President's quote. I went and like reproduced the same thing in the actual exam. I concluded with the President's quote. So the idea is GS3 is very current oriented. So pick your current affairs properly and practice a lot. And whenever you find that the question is very, like the cellulose question you must have gone through, right? What do we know? We know nothing about it. We just know that, okay, decomposition is happening. So I explained about the process of decomposition, the basic process of decomposition, and that's it. I did not know anything more than that. And then I generated a new side heading by saying, why should we study processes such as this? And then I tried to link it to how we are focusing on waste management or waste treatment, and how most of these treatments or managements are not eco-friendly. But if we can understand the natural process of decomposition as seen in the cellulose and others, then maybe we can take some of those and incorporate in our technologies. So this is the relevance part. They did not ask me the relevance, but I knew nobody would anyway write anything for this. So anything extra that I write which is relevant to the question will fetch me marks. So whenever you get a bouncer question, just keep this in mind. Nobody is writing that. So you cannot leave that. That's where you score marks. And second, if you write something relevant, be little innovative at that moment. You'll be rewarded well, because it's all about relative, right? They will compare your answer with whoever he's been checking for the last 1 hour or so. Nobody has written anything. You, on the other hand, have managed to write something, and then you went a step ahead and tried to give its relevance, whether asked or not. So you'll be rewarded. So this approach can be followed.
Now, in the recent time, you have shifted from geography to anthropology. So how did you make sure that within 1 year you are going to get the master, or what did you do? How was it?
So since I had geography earlier and I made all the mistakes one can possibly do with an optional. So I was like doing a lot of mistakes. So I made sure I was not repeating any of these mistakes. So the first thing I did was make my own notes. I used standard textbooks and made my own notes. And this is also because I was at home. I was studying from Narayanpet district, which is quite far away from the city. And I did not want to go to Delhi at all. So I had no other option but to sit and study at home. So I ordered all the basic textbooks and I prepared notes, first thing. And the second thing, right from the word go, I focused on how to get marks. So it's not about me trying to master anthropology subject at all. I still have not mastered. I've only focused on how to extract marks out of this subject. So for example, in this, I feel physical anthropology and archaeology are extremely scoring, and they're dead basic and static stuff. So I focused a lot on these two topics and I answered all the questions that came in. So like by focusing on areas which give you marks, by doing only those things which will fetch you marks. Like I said, for example, the theories. I did not want to have a holistic, comprehensive understanding of theory. I wanted to understand the theory to such an extent that I can summarize it in 4 points and maybe write a good answer when it comes to the exam. So I would say marks-oriented approach is what changed.
What motivated you in this long journey? Like at every time when you got down, which motivated you to get up again to fight the battle?
True, like I was very demotivated at times. I was underconfident. I was constantly questioning myself that if I can ever make it to that list, forget rank 3. I questioned my career choices. All of this happened, which I think are very common for anybody who has gone past one attempt. So multiple things that helped me. First is my parents and my friends, definitely. Like, they always believed in me. Even though when I had no faith in myself, they kept saying that, you're good at this, you can do this. They kept saying that. And the second thing is, I always progressed in some way or the other from every attempt to attempt. Some progress I was seeing. I was seeing that because I was learning from the mistakes that I was making. So this small confidence I had that I won't make the same mistakes again. So I have the ability to learn from mistakes. So this. And thirdly, planning aggressively. So like whenever something goes wrong, I always started fresh whenever something went wrong. And I made large plans. So I had monthly plans, weekly targets, daily targets. So I just focused on finishing my daily target and try to think less about the bigger picture and what will happen in 1 year, will I clear it or not. And fourthly, like, I try to look at life beyond UPSC. Earlier, I was like really just into the exam and always in the books. But this time around, I studied only for like 7 or 8 hours, and then I started learning new things. Like, I enrolled myself in badminton, I went to karate classes, I cooked in the evenings, I got a pet and started playing with the pet. So I try to look at life outside UPSC and get a sense of balance in life. That helped me be not so unhappy all the time. So it motivated me, it helped me focus better on the next day. So there's no one formula. You just have to understand that everybody is going through the same thing, and maybe learn about mental health, learn about emotional hygiene, and do small things which can get you out.
Concerning the dynamics of prelims, how we can accommodate ourselves in prelims now?
Right. I think prelims will continue to be like this. It will only worsen as the years pass by. So there is no single formula. First is do your basics right. All your basic textbooks. For history, you have Bipin Chandra, I think 11th or 12th class NCERT. For ancient and medieval, you have Tamil Nadu textbook. For polity, you have Lakshmikant. For different subjects, you have the dead basic books. Do them really well, make notes out of them, very crisp notes, revise them again and again. And that is 30% of your preparation. The next 70% is your tests. You have to practice a lot. It is through these practice that you learn how to deal with such bouncer questions. So for every prelims, I used to practice 2 test series, which is nearly 60 to 70 tests before going to the actual prelims. So there is no shortcut to it. Prelims is donkey-like hard work, and you have to do it. So, and you have to know, you should put that hard work in practice, not trying to accumulate new things again and again. So do those papers. And I also had a thumb rule that every paper that I do for prelims, I should revise it thrice before going to the actual exam. So I had an extensive Excel sheet where I planned everything. When will I take this particular test? When will I revise it for the first time, for the second time? And the last time that I revised, I used to note down if there's anything that I still don't remember from that paper, or if there's anything that I feel should be revised right before the day of the exam, I used to write them in A4 size sheets. So in one day before the prelims, I just used to have like 10 or 12 A4 sheets with all this chota information written across from the test, and I used to revise that only. So the idea is practice. So through practice, you learn how to eliminate. You learn how to guess or make educated guesses. You know which is your golden figure, 85, 90, 83. What is your golden figure? You have to figure it out. So these things will help.
Madam, what suggestions do you give for those who are writing mains?
This year, so please go with the approach of scoring marks. Anything, you should only be doing things that you know for sure will fetch you marks. Running behind the same static content will not fetch you marks. You already know the static whatever that you studied before. Just believe in that, and beyond, do work beyond that. So what happens most of the time is we are always stuck at the stage of accumulating content or writing, preparing notes and all of this. So now that mains is just 3 months away, do only those things that fetch you marks, like preparing introductions and good conclusions. looking for diagrams for different topics, looking for good examples, right, and focusing on only those current affairs which you feel can come in the exam, like high probable stuff. Do not read every obscure topic that monthly magazines provide. And lastly and most importantly, practice more. You know, you may write crappy answers in the beginning, you may not be able to finish the paper in the beginning, but that's all right. Just keep writing tests and learn from those tests and look at the topper copies. In short, do only those things which will fetch you those additional marks. Don't do the same mistakes and don't repeat the same static content.
Regarding current affairs, many say that a lot of questions are depend on the
Can you ask?
current affairs questions. A lot of people say it will be coming from either newspaper or editorials. So how to approach that?
Right.
Prepare from that.
Okay. So I actually did not make notes directly from the newspaper by reading from it. I read the newspaper and I tried to identify the important topics that were coming in the newspaper again and again. So these topics I made a note of in a book. And for these, after like once I accumulated 7 or 8 topics, I sat down on one fine day and I made notes on this. So when I was making notes on these topics, I looked at all the sources that are available. I used to type something on the internet and I used to see like, you know, what all I can make. And I always knew the kind of structure my current affair notes would have. Like, what is this about? And how many dimensions can I write on this particular topic? So if there is a question, if there's a topic on G20, I noted it down on my book. And I would go on a Sunday or so, I would sit and make notes on this. When I was making notes on it, I would think about, okay, what is this G20? How many countries are there, and why is G20 relevant from economic perspective, from today cultural perspective, from geopolitics, from the perspective of, you know, environment, even that. And then come to the fact that India had its presidency, and then I would try to write some points on why India's presidency is so relevant and so important for us, and how India can utilize this to its best potential. So this is a question that I generated on my own, and then I looked up, okay, can I find some answers to this? And my answers to these were very crisp. Like, for example, I remember I linked G20, India's G20 presidency relevance to cooperative federalism by saying that India is hosting meetings in 50 cities of the country. It's not just happening in Delhi, which shows that there is a kind of center-state coordination in creating these meetings. So that's a point on cooperative federalism. And it's just small point, cooperative federalism, meetings in more than 50 cities. This is a point that I noted down. And culturally, significance of G20 for India, showcase of India's diversity of culture. For example, Adi Mahotsav Mela happened, or there was also a G20 lunch or something happened at that time. Just a small example, your point and a small example. So you have to think about, okay, in how many angles can I think about this current affair topics, and make very crisp notes on it, and just revise and summarize it in one sentence and put it in my book. And secondly, for prelims, yes, from the newspaper itself, I picked up a lot of things. So if there's a species mentioned, I know species get asked regularly. Or if there's a national park mentioned, I used to write it down in the book. So my prelims current affairs book, yes, I wrote it down directly from Hindu and I revised it repeatedly.
In answer, in what ways can intro and conclusion can be in different ways? With intro and conclusion, in what ways can we make some creative or something?
Okay, so there are multiple ways to do this. For example, you can quote DPSPs in the conclusion, or you can quote UN conferences. You can quote some scholars. For example, there is a scholar called Joseph Stiglitz. He was, I think, a Nobel Prize winner. He said, like, the Third World War is with the climate change. So he made some statement like that. I picked up that statement. And there was a question on cities and sustainable development of cities. So I used him in the conclusion. I said, like former Nobel laureate Joseph Stiglitz, he said that the war is with, the Third World War is going to be with climate change. If that is so, then the battleground is our cities. So we better focus on our cities. So he said only the first part, but I linked it to whatever question that came up. So if you have such generic versatile statements, whenever you come across them, so the where do you come across them? When you read newspaper. Like I used to read newspaper regularly in the morning, just over a cup of tea or something. If I find something really interesting, I would immediately like write it in my book. And this particular Joseph Stiglitz thing I used in GS1, I used in GS3, I also used in essay, in 3 entirely different contexts. So you pick up such statements. So DPSPs, these quotes. So for international relations, I decided no matter what the question is, my conclusion will be a quote given by Ministry of External Affairs, Mr. Jaishankar. So he gives very nice quotes. Some of them are specific, but some of them are very generic. Like you take those generic quotes and you mold them to your question. So his quotes I prepared like 8 or 9 quotes. So these kind of things you have to be, and some I lifted directly from topocopies. Like for example, that Jalika 2 example I was giving earlier, I picked it up directly from Mr. Maurya Bharadwaj's paper, and I used it for my symbolic anthropology. So things like that, like you can do a lot of things. And maybe for the introduction, like go beyond definitions. So everybody is defining now. What makes your answer stand out? Go like give that extra edge. So your introduction should be such that it will also secure you 1 mark. So if you write a generic introduction or basic definition, it won't fetch you mark. It may not fetch you mark. So maybe like put some fact there, or use some report, things like that, or a constitutional article or a judgment, anything like that. So you can just think about, okay, how can I make sure I'm getting 1 mark for introduction and 1 mark for conclusion. What happens most time is we take them for granted. We write kuch bhi in the conclusion just to finish off the answer and run to the next paper, next question. So don't do that. Pay attention to them. If you pay attention to them, you'll find ways to generate good introductions and good conclusions.
Super congratulations.
Thank you.
Kudos to your Devagya Academy. Ma'am, how do you remember and revise the static subjects and
There is no shortcut. You have to revise again and again and again. So I followed a method called active recall. Maybe you can read up a little bit about this method. And 2 things that I followed: active recall and spaced repetition. So spaced repetition is, see, whenever you study something, the retention, it goes away with time. This is time. This is the retention you have in your head. So today I'm studying, and after 1 month, it's as good as nothing. So you have to interrupt this cycle. So how do you interrupt? You revise it here. So you make a new cycle. You interrupt here. You make a new cycle. So for me, so this is 1 week. So when I study something today, I'll mostly revise it tomorrow, or even if not, I'll revise it after a week, and then I'll revise it after 15 days. So this is by answering questions. So if I want to revise modern India, let's say I want to revise modern India, my static part for mains. So what I used to do is I used to collect questions, mains questions for modern India, let's say from previous year's questions or from any other source. I had a list of like, okay, 20 questions. This is my modern India syllabus. This is my 20 or 30 questions. I used to sit and brainstorm on them. So that means you're actively recalling. You're not passively reading your notes. So when you're actively recalling, you also think in the context of introduction or conclusion. You also learn how to answer as per the demand of the question. Even for prelims. So that is why tests are important. Tests are a mechanism for, or a tool for active recall. So instead of sitting and reading the same thing, I used to write like 5 sectional tests for modern India and make sure I was revising everything. So I was forcing my brain to recollect things. Whatever it could recollect, I would write in that test. Whatever it could not, I would come back, sit and analyze and see what I forgot, and then revise them later. So these 2 techniques. So this is why I had an Excel sheet. So everything I read or every test that I made, this is my revision schedule. Everything was put in the Excel sheet. Once. Timetable in the sense? For 2024. Like, see, one thing I learned from my so many years of struggle is you cannot emulate anybody else. You have to develop your own style, you have to develop your own strategy, your own timetable, everything, and you have to own it up completely. So see what is your pace of studying, see if you are comfortable with it, and accordingly prepare your timetable. And you have all the dates. So you have the date for prelims, you have the date for mains. So accordingly split your entire time into month, like 3-month targets, monthly targets, weekly targets, and daily targets.
Was there any plan B? Because it's very tough.
Yeah, when I started, I had no plan B. So when I graduated, I thought going to Delhi will be the end of my career problems. That I would, become an IAS officer if I go to Delhi. But clearly things did not turn out like that. And I did not have a plan B. And it made me very underconfident and insecure for a good amount of time. Because all my friends in their chosen fields were progressing while I was sitting back at home, isolating myself. So it did not. But eventually, like, it is through this process, I worked on my other hobbies or my interests. Like, I like to do yoga. So I thought maybe I can go ahead and do some masters in yoga, get certified and become a teacher. Or I could maybe start a food business because I was interested in food and entrepreneurship. So different things opened up, and also I got appointments from some of the central PSUs because I cleared mains and appeared for the interview. They called me for an interview. So based on that, I got them. So, and I also worked as a copy checker at a coaching institute. So small things to support myself here and there. Not even like to support myself, to just tell myself that I can do something. So I did not have a solid plan B, but I think plan B, C, D opened up as I went. So whatever I said now, until now, it was their copies that I looked at. So earlier I was not really looking at topper copies properly, or maybe even if I'm looking, I'm just like browsing through them. But this time around, I looked at topper copies to see how much can I extract from them. So all these are, it's just their great, like I'm grateful for them that they helped me with this. Right. So some of the things, see, again, every case study requires introduction and conclusion. And if you carefully go through the previous year's case studies, you will see that case studies are always thematic. There are some themes that get repeated. So for all these themes, I had introductions, conclusions. For example, gender justice is a very common theme. So I had like really good punchline introductions and conclusions for this prepared. I actually picked it up from I think 2021's AIR-1 copy, Ms. Shruti Sharma, her copy. From her copy, I picked up these lines. This was one thing. And second, I cut down on the sentences that I was writing. I followed, again, a diagrammatic approach even for this. For example, so this year there were a lot of questions where they asked evaluate the options. So that means you have to write pros and you have to write cons. And there were 5 questions in each case study. If you keep on writing sentences, you won't be able to finish the paper. So what I did was, option 1, write whatever you want to write, and then pro, con. And I would just write upholds justice. If that process could be delaying. Or I would write participatory approach. Consensus difficult. So my point is, I summarized those pros and cons of my options in using keywords and with just words. I did not sit and write sentences. So this is one thing that I did. Introductions and conclusions and examples. Even in case studies, I use the examples that I prepared for ethics in general. Wherever possible, I put case studies. So I try to show by arrows. Sometimes, like whatever small diagrams that I picked up from top copies. And the conclusion I always used to write some philosophy or something that makes this feel like an ethics answer. So for example, Kant's philosophy, moral command, I would always write Doing the right thing may not be the easiest thing, but as Kant said, it's our moral duty to follow the moral command, something like that. The point is, use some philosopher in the conclusion. So these things, and what you can do with case studies is open topic copies, look at the question of the case study, close the answer, and you answer that case study on your own, and now check how the topper has written. So that way you'll immediately know where you're lagging behind. So that approach I followed for. So I downloaded copies of AR-1, AR-2, AR-3 up to AR-10, and then I tried to like do case studies from there itself.
Regarding the graduation to the rank where we are approaching the final interview date at time, if the years are so long, will the marks reduce? Kind of, if we are not doing any permanent job or like doing part-time job for the basic needs, will it affect?
I do not think it affects that much because it didn't affect my score, I feel. But you have to be, see, personality test is about your personality, right? You're displaying your personality there. And you have to understand that you should not show off, or you should not try to give like, most best answers to the complex solutions. It's an entirely different game. So for me, I had like small thumb rules. So I have to be confident, I have to be cheerful, I have to be very honest and own up myself. I have to give balanced answers. I have to be very polite and humble. So these 5 things that I had actually written on my fingers that day and then went in. I only wanted to do this. I didn't want to give the best solution to the Ukraine conflict, which they asked. So I only gave a balanced answer. And the first question that was asked to me was, what have you been doing for the past 5 years or 4 years? And see, this question could easily have made me insecure, or I could have been on the defensive. But I remember, okay, I just have to be honest. So I told ma'am, I was making mistakes all this while and I was learning from my mistakes. And it took me a little long, that's why. And she was happy with the answer, because I was being honest. So that's the difference. Like, you have to own up yourself, be comfortable with who you are, be comfortable with your setbacks, with your, wherever you are. If you are that comfortable, they will also be comfortable. They won't judge you. So. Actually, my father is in the police department. So, chinnappa nunchi he used to motivate me towards the services. So, he used to come home and talk about what the district collector was doing or what the SP was doing. So, he never like directly told me, go study this. But he kept talking about this thing. So, civil services as a career option was always at the back of my mind. But like everybody, I prepared for IIT and I went to IIT. And in the final year, like I was just evaluating what options do I have. So I thought, okay, like civil services seems to be a good platform. It's a good career. So I started preparing for that.
You mentioned that in the previous option you were making a lot of mistakes. There you had 2 choices. One is to rectify those mistakes or maybe some other one, which is going to be a bit risky because you have spent a lot of time in the previous option. So what made you to choose some other option, on what basis? And why did you never thought of rectifying those mistakes in the previous option?
Right, okay. So I wrote 3 mains with geography. And in those 3 mains, that is what I was trying to do, rectify the mistakes. But there came a point where it felt like maybe this was not my cup of tea. I gave my best. I was trying to learn from my mistakes. And I had put a lot of emotional investment into that paper as well. And when you do not score well, despite your sincere and right efforts, it can be very demotivating. So, and at that point, something happened. Like 3rd attempt, I appeared for the interview but failed to clear it. So I was obviously very low. And then I went ahead and wrote prelims and I could not clear prelims. And this was because of my CSAT. So it was an even that was the lowest I had in my life until then. So I thought, okay, I can't get any lower. Like, this is the bottom. I hit the rock bottom. Now what will go bad? So I thought this is the right time to take a risky decision, which was to change my option. And I changed my optional and I got a very fresh start. Sometimes when you're like very long into the preparation, you become complacent and you become old. So that new optional gave me a fresh perspective, fresh start, and a bit of hope to go ahead, and that's why I took the decision.
What was the benchmark that you had before moving to some other option? Or what aspect did you choose?
Right. So since I took geography without any thought into it, just everybody was saying geography, so I went and took geography. This time I evaluated different options which I felt I could do well. So I had like 4 or 5 optionals. I looked at the length of the syllabus. I found anthropology to be the shortest. And secondly, I looked at the previous year's questions for some topics. For example, if there is classical evolutionism, what are the previous year's questions on that? And I try to see how direct are the questions. If the questions are more direct, you can answer them and get more marks. And thirdly, I looked at whether this subject will interest me or not. So, and I knew nothing in anthropology. I did not know the physical anthropology. I did not know archaeology. So everything was so fascinating for me. So in fact, when I had sociology, PSIR, anthro as a thing. Last 3 final stage, but I was very not at all sure about what to take. So you know the Ember and Ember book, right? So I picked up that book, and within a span of 4 or 5 days, I just read the whole book, just read the book to see what anthropology is about. And then I could actually read the book. It was very interesting. I did not read for the exam or anything. I just read that book to understand what anthropology is or anything. And it was written so well. And I got interested in the subject, and I did not even go and bother to read for PSI or anything. I was like, okay, this is going to be it. So that. So do not take CSAT lightly is my first tip. I graduated from an IIT and I failed in a CSAT once. So don't take it lightly. And secondly, don't be very rigid on I'll attempt only math questions or I'll attempt only comprehension questions, because 1 year comprehension are difficult, the next year math are difficult. So answer easy questions from all the 3 chunks, all the 3 parts. And thirdly, in logical reasoning or mathematics, there are certain types of questions which get repeated. So there are clock questions, calendar questions, averages, cube questions, permutation and combination problems. So identify these. There are like 8 or 9 topics, and I write down those topics and find how to solve this in a very easy way. The shortcuts, the formulas, everything. You go to YouTube and find out. And these 3, if you do these 3, you'll be able to score qualifying marks. And pick up the easy questions. Don't get stuck on the difficult questions. All you need to get is 66 marks. So you pick up the easiest questions from the math and logical reasoning and answer just those questions. I refer to the standard textbooks. Like for every topic there is a standard textbook. No, there is Pnath. And then you have Upadhyay for theories, you have Nadeem Hasnain, you have I think D.K. Bhattacharya's one book on archaeology, whatever. So what I did was, I did not read those textbooks from cover to cover. So I picked up a syllabus topic and then I went to that textbook and I read whatever there is about that syllabus topics. I came back and made my notes on that. So, and sometimes if I felt that that textbook does not have adequate content, I used to look for second resources like any material that is available on the internet. And Telugu Academy books, I use them extensively because they're written so simply. They have everything in tabular format. They have good diagrams in it. So that also I used. Right. One is the textbook. You read from the textbook, you'll understand. Next, if you do not understand, ask the teacher or discuss it with the friends. Go on to YouTube, go on to Wikipedia. Just make sure you're understanding the topic. Do anything that is needed, but at the end of the day, you must understand the topic decently enough and make your own notes out of it. So use whatever sources are available. Your focus should be on understanding it and making your notes.
Water, please.
So many aspirants are working hard to get into this, but only few of them are getting into the position. what exactly the UPSC demands from an aspirant and what the mistakes are most of the aspirants are doing. It's a game of knowledge, or it's a game of something more than the
Right. So it's definitely not a game of knowledge. And UPSC, I do not know what UPSC is demanding, but it's a competitive exam. So you have to make yourself stand out. So most aspirants, what happens, at least in my opinion, is they do not put an effort to stand out among others. So like I discussed so many small things. Your conscious effort to gain one extra mark in every paper will take you to top 10. So these things that are not focused, instead it's about reading too much, keeping on making notes, refining notes and going ahead, and not practicing. So it's just these small things. Those who clear are not giants or like, you know, super intelligent people at all. You know, it's just they did these small things and try to stand out among other papers. So that's it.
I have one question. ఇప్పుడు ఎవరైతే 2024కి ప్రిపేర్ అవుతున్నారో, సో 2024 ప్రిపేర్ అయ్యే వాళ్ళకి ఎలాంటి స్కెడ్యూల్, ఎలాంటి టైం టేబుల్ ఉంటే బాగుంటుంది ఫర్ తెలుగు పీపుల్?
మీరు 3 months ముందు వరకు ప్రిలిమ్స్ గురించి అంత ఆలోచించిన అవసరం లేదు. ఆ 3 months ముందు వరకు ఫోకస్ ఆన్ మెయిన్స్. అండ్ మెయిన్స్లో కూడా బేసిక్ బుక్స్ చదివి నోట్స్ చేసుకున్న తర్వాత ఈ బేసిక్ నోట్స్ మీకు ప్రిలిమ్స్కి కూడా యూజ్ అవుతుంది. సో డూ యువర్ బేసిక్స్ రైట్, and then right away jump into the syllabus wise notes. So ఆప్షనల్ అయినా జిఎస్ అయినా సరే సిలబస్ తీసుకోండి, దానికి ప్రకారంగా నోట్స్ చేసుకోండి. మీకు చదివే కంఫర్ట్తో, మీ పేస్తో ప్లాన్ చేసుకోండి. ఓకే, నాకు ఇన్ని మంత్స్ ఉన్నాయి, ఇన్ని పేపర్స్ ఉన్నాయి, ఆప్షనల్ ఉంది, నేను డేలో మధ్యాహ్నం ఆప్షనల్ చదువుతాను, మార్నింగ్ జనరల్ స్టడీస్ చదువుతాను, అండ్ ఈ పేపర్ కంప్లీట్ చేయడానికి నాకు ఇన్ని మంత్స్ కావాలి అని యూ హ్యావ్ టు ఎవాల్వ్ యువర్ ఓన్ ప్లాన్, యువర్ ఓన్ స్ట్రాటజీ. సో ఇట్లా ఉన్న టైంలో ట్రై టు ఫిట్ వాట్ ఎవర్ యువర్ పేస్ ఇస్. సో దీంతో యూ కెన్ ప్రిపేర్.
అంటే సీరియస్నెస్ ఒకటి, కన్సిస్టెన్సీ ఒకటి చాలా ఇంపార్టెంట్ రోల్ ప్లే చేస్తుంది. అంటే ముఖ్యంగా ఎవరైతే 2024 ప్రిపేర్ అవుదాం అనుకుంటున్నారో, ఈ పర్టికులర్ ఎగ్జామినేషన్ ఎప్పుడైతే ఈ ఫీల్డ్లోకి వస్తామో సీరియస్నెస్ అనేది చాలా ఇంపార్టెంట్. ఎందుకంటే కాంపిటీషన్ ఆ లెవెల్లో ఉంటుంది కాబట్టి వీ హ్యావ్ టు బి సూపర్ సీరియస్. ఎందుకంటే మన మీద పేరెంట్స్ నమ్మకం పెట్టుకుంటారు, కొందరు టీచర్స్ నమ్మకం పెట్టుకుంటారు, లేకపోతే మీరు చదువుతారు, మీరు ఎన్నో వదులుకొని వస్తారు. ఫస్ట్ థింగ్ ఈజ్ వీ హ్యావ్ టు బి వెరీ సీరియస్. నెంబర్ 2 ఏంటంటే కన్సిస్టెన్సీ, మొండి పట్టుదల. ఇలాంటి క్యారెక్టరిస్టిక్స్ ఫస్ట్ ఇంపార్టెంట్. మనము ఏ ఎడ్యుకేషనల్ ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్ అయినా ఏదైనా కాదు, ఈ రోజు నుంచి ఎలా చదివామన్నది ఇంపార్టెంట్. ఇప్పుడు తనే మనకి ఎగ్జాంపుల్. సో సూపర్ సీరియస్నెస్, కన్సిస్టెన్సీ. ఇంకా ఏం క్వశ్చన్స్ లేవనుకుంటా? ఏమైనా క్వశ్చన్స్ ఉన్నాయి ఇంకా?
What does it mean reading too much? So Lakshmikant, there are 1025 pages are there. So is it important with line by line, or how do you know like what to read and what not to read?
ఓకే, సో లక్ష్మీకాంత్ మనం మెయిన్లీ ప్రిలిమ్స్ కోసం చదువుతాం కదా. అండ్ ప్రిలిమ్స్లో మీరు అనలైజ్ చేస్తే ప్రీవియస్ ఇయర్స్ క్వశ్చన్స్, మోస్ట్ క్వశ్చన్స్ పార్లమెంట్ మీద వస్తాయి, ఫండమెంటల్ రైట్స్ మీద వస్తాయి, డిపిఎస్ ఎస్పీస్ మీద వస్తాయి, అండ్ ఎమర్జెన్సీ ఈ ప్రావిజన్స్ అండ్ అమెండ్మెంట్స్ వీటి మీద. సో వీటిని గట్టిగా చదవండి మల్టిపుల్ టైమ్స్. ఇంకా కొన్ని ఉంటాయి లైక్ చిన్న టాపిక్స్ విచ్ ఆర్ నాట్ సో ఇంపార్టెంట్, వాటిని ఒక గ్లాన్స్లో ఫినిష్ చేసేటట్టు. బట్ బై నాట్ రీడింగ్ టూ మచ్, ఐ మీన్ ఏదైనా సిలబస్ని పక్కన పెట్టి ఇంకా దాన్నే ఎండ్లాగా చదవడం. మంత్లీస్ ఉన్నాయి ఫర్ ఎగ్జాంపుల్, చాలామంది ఏం చేస్తారు, అదే చదువుతుంటారు, దాన్నే రివైజ్ చేస్తారు, హైలైట్ చేస్తారు. ఇవన్నీ సరే, మీ ఫోకస్ సిలబస్ మీద ఉండాలి. సిలబస్కి ప్రీవియస్ ఇయర్స్ క్వశ్చన్స్కి తగ్గట్టు మాత్రమే చదవాలి. మీరు ఏం చదువుతున్నా ఎట్ ద బ్యాక్ ఆఫ్ యువర్ మైండ్ ఏమని ఉండాలి, ఇది నాకు మార్క్స్ తెస్తుందా అని. తేకపోతే ఒక్క పారాగ్రాఫ్ కూడా చదవద్దు. ఎందుకు, మనం రీసెర్చ్ చేయడానికి లేం కదా. లైక్ ruthless, you have to be very ruthless with what you're studying.
As you already told that you got many kind of valuable inputs from your friends and everything. So what are the kind of valuable inputs you got from this sir?
సో నేను సార్ని ఇంటర్వ్యూ ప్రిపరేషన్ అప్పుడు మెయిన్లీ కలిసాను 2020లో అండ్ దెన్ 2022లో కూడా. సో నాకు 2020లో ఆల్దో నా ఆప్షనల్ జాగ్రఫీ అయినా నేను ఇక్కడ ఇంటర్వ్యూ గైడెన్స్ తీసుకుని ఉండే. సో ఎవ్రీడే క్లాసెస్ పెడుతుండే సార్, ఆల్ ఇంటర్వ్యూ సెలెక్టెడ్ వాళ్ళతో ఒక జూమ్ మీటింగ్ పెట్టి హీ యూస్ టు గెట్ అస్ ఫెమిలియర్ విత్ ద ఐడియా ఆఫ్ టాకింగ్. సో ఆ రోజు జరిగిన న్యూస్ పేపర్స్ నుంచి చిన్న క్వశ్చన్స్ అడుగుతుండే అండ్ వీ యూస్ టు టాక్. ఇది ఒకటి. అండ్ దాని తర్వాత వెన్ ఐ వాంటెడ్ టు చేంజ్ మై ఆప్షనల్, ఐ వాజ్ వెరీ అన్ష్యూర్, నాకు ఏం చేయాలో తెలియకుండే. అండ్ మోస్ట్ పీపుల్ ఆర్ లైక్ డోంట్ డూ ఇట్. సో నేను అప్పుడు సార్ దగ్గరకు వచ్చాను అండ్ ఐ టోల్డ్ దెమ్ దిస్ ఇస్ మై జర్నీ అండ్ దిస్ ఇస్ వాట్ ఐ వాంట్ టు డూ, షిఫ్ట్ టు ఆంథ్రో అని. And then he said, if that is what you feel, just go ahead with it. And he told me about like people he knew who were suffering with geography as well, but who could never, they couldn't do the risk of changing the option. So you're already there, you're willing to take that risk, go ahead and chepparu. And neeku em support kavalana, I'll check copies in time. So all the support he extended. And again, interview ki kuda, it was my first mains and first interview with anthropology. సో అగైన్ అన్ని టాపిక్స్కి ఇంటర్వ్యూ ఓరియంటెడ్గా చిన్న చిన్న వీడియోస్ చేస్తుండే సార్ జూమ్ మీటింగ్లో. సో నేను అవి కూడా అటెండ్ అవుతుండే. సో మోస్ట్లీ లైక్ ఆంథ్రోపాలజీని కొంచెం కాంటెంపరీ ఆస్పెక్ట్లో అండర్స్టాండ్ చేసుకోవడానికి సార్ హెల్ప్.
మీకు ర్యాంక్ వచ్చినప్పుడు సార్ ర్యాంక్ వచ్చినట్టు ఫీల్ అయ్యింది.